All right, what's up, everybody? You are live on the Zach and Matt show with Matt, and we have a very special guest for you today, Blair Walsingham, who is running for Congress in Tennessee's 1st Congressional District on a platform of humanity first and universal basic income. Blair, thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, my first question before we get down to kind of like the policy details, which I think are very interesting when I first looked at your website and you reached out like 2 weeks ago, and I saw that you have pretty much a lot of policies that were central to Andrew Yang's candidacy. So I'm curious, how did you first hear about Andrew Yang? Like, was he because I know you launched your campaign, I think March 2nd. So kind of a newer campaign, but the election isn't till I think August, correct?
August 6th is our primary.
Yeah. So how did you first hear about Andrew Yang, and or what inspired you to implement all these kind of new ideas that he had championed into your platform?
So when I first heard of Andrew Yang, I thought he was crazy. I was like, heck no, this guy is trying to buy votes, promising $1,000 a month to people. And I really kind of just brushed him off as kind of an extremist. Didn't want anything to do with it. And then I picked up a few books and I really dug into it and was like, okay, maybe I should pay more attention to this. And I did. And I spent months and months literally researching UBI and how it works, where it would come from, who pays for it, how it all works. And I was like, wow, this is phenomenal. It solves so many problems. And so I really just said, okay, so who is this Andrew Yang guy? What is he doing? What is his other ideas? And he had so many. I spent every day, I picked a policy to read and study and go through. And I love the nonpartisan parts of his policies and how it just unites everybody. And that's something that's just so close to my heart. I just really want to end a lot of this division and hate going around and be able to help people. So he did definitely influence my campaign, which is pretty clear if you look at it, right?
Yeah, for sure. No, but I agree with everything you said. That's kind of what attracted me to his candidacy. And I thought universal basic income. I was like, huh, what? This doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Then you dive into it, and next thing you know, you're like, wow, I need to implement this now.
Right.
I was looking on
like yesterday.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, imagine if we had it during this current coronavirus thing, and now everyone's trying to catch up. But I was looking on your website, and I saw that you're an Air Force veteran. So thank you very much for serving our country. And I'm curious, how did you get into the Air Force, and kind of like where did you go to school? How did that all begin?
Okay, well, both of my grandfathers are veterans. My one grandfather was a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. He flew fighter pilots and stuff overseas and was in many, many wars, including Vietnam. My other grandfather was in Vietnam, and he did some, it's not necessarily a war, it was like the shutdown of the embassy in South Africa. And that was when we were much, much younger. It's way before you and my time. So I grew up hearing all their stories and learning so much about it. And then my dad he was a full-time active duty, he was a crew chief, but his entire time, he was almost always overseas. So from the day I was born until I joined myself, he was pretty much overseas. And I was 17 when I enlisted. So I was going to high school in Riverview, Florida. I doubled up on all my core classes so that I could graduate early, and had my dad actually sign a waiver so that I could join under 18. And it was the best decision of my life. Like, I recommend it highly. It's a wonderful experience. So
yeah. I mean, that's incredible to enlist at 17 years of age. What did you like do in the Air Force?
So I came in as services. My best friend and I actually joined together. We were like buddies. We went through the buddy system. We went to basic together. We were roommates in tech school together. So we actually had each other there, but we both love helping people. It's just kind of our nature. And when we were looking at what kind of jobs we want, services is really the dependable people. It's you set up bear base for units, you feed the people, you make sure they get to talk to their family. We also run lodging the gym, mortuary affairs, which I am very thankful I never had to do. I was trained in it, but I didn't ever have to physically do that. I mostly cooked. That was my main job, is running the dining hall. So,
yeah,
feeding the people.
yeah. No, one of the most important. You can't have an army if they're
Gotta
starving.
eat.
So
Right.
yeah, so that's a interesting background. And then another thing that I found interesting, it said that you're a hobby farmer, which I know,
Yeah.
I think in Tennessee's first congressional district, it's a more rural district, and I would assume like farming is one of the bigger, more important industries, which means, and I know farmers are just, from when I was in Iowa, farmers are very passionate about what the government is going to do to help them. So I'm kind of curious, what is your experience as a hobby farmer? And then I guess to follow up, first policy question, what do you think that farmers in Tennessee's first congressional district are looking for from leaders in Washington?
Okay. So that's a great question, because it is very rural out here. I'd say it's more mountainside than farm, but it is a good blend. There's a lot of hemp farms popping up out here, which I'm insanely supportive of. They just opened a lot of processing plants. I have a 9-page list of processing plants to try to help people find out where they need to take their crops to, so that they can really come up with some new income, because there's been a big downslide as far as the dairy industry and the meat industry goes. So a lot of these farmers are actually really hurting right now, and they need a boost, right? So we're trying to figure out what can you guys do that is going to get you money that the government is going to be behind, that's legal, because we just got through that hurdle of even making it legal. So I think a big thing for them is change. They're going, well, this is what I've done my whole life. This is what my grandfather did. It's all I know. So when they're looking to Washington to say, like, what are you guys going to do? They really need help with loans. And they have some programs set up to say, look, we'll give you this equipment. You have this amount of time, this much money for this many acres. And it's a really intensive process. And when I actually looked through the website just a few days ago, it didn't seem as warm as it should be. I feel like a lot of people out here don't have internet. They're not familiar with technology. And for them to have to go through kind of this really long, intensive process to get help as just farming, it seemed a little intense. So there's definitely some gray area that needs some refining to be able to help everybody out here.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love that you brought up. Oh, sorry. Continue.
No, you're fine. As far as my hobby farming goes, it's really just more for fun. We do want to grow some hemp, but we have not started yet. We have like 68 acres, and a lot of it is mountainside also. So there's like some unique aspects as far as getting the ground ready. And hemp is actually a great product to do that. If you grow hemp, it actually gets rid of pests, and it helps put a bunch of nutrients in your soil, so that when you go to grow your next crop, it actually does much better than it would if you had planted it without having hemp there first. So there's actually a ton of benefits. We have some sheep. I have a pet pig. It's more of a farm than an agricultural farm. Her name is Truffalophagus, aka Truffles, the mini pig. I have 4 kids, so we have some creative names around the farm animals.
Yeah, they came up with them. I want to. What was it you said? Oh yeah, you mentioned the fact that how kind of rural communities right now, there seems to be like a divide between where a lot of the investment and resources and infrastructure are going to the cities, and the cities are exploding and growing in population, and kind of rural communities like in the district that you're running for seem to kind of been left behind. And I think that's a big one in terms of broadband and internet, which is why I'm happy to see that high-speed internet in rural areas is on your website.
Yeah, that's a huge problem. So in case anybody noticed, I am at a coffee shop, and that is because we cannot get internet at our house. Where we live, it's literally almost not provided. There's 2 companies who will do a setup, and it's satellite, and it's insanely expensive. Just to give you guys a rough estimate, I paid about $200 a month. If it rains, if the wind blows, if there's a cloud, it doesn't work at all. And then on a good day, it works a couple hours out of the day. You can't stream, I can't make phone calls, I can't video chat, none of that. So it's insanely expensive, and it almost always does not work. So that's a huge problem for a lot of people out there. And it's not a problem just for like the adults, like, hey, we want to watch Netflix, but the kids that go to the schools, they can't do online programs, they can't go home. And especially now with like the schools being closed, our kids can't really get online and do programs or do online learning. And that seems like a really big problem where we're being left behind. And there is like one other option that recently came available that this insanely smart kid has he triangulates all this stuff and puts up like different satellites in place, and it's really technical. And he can get you some decent internet. And that's what I used last night that my neighbor has. It's a $1,500 setup. Let me tell you, a lot of people out here, I live in the second poorest county in Tennessee, right next to the first poorest county in Tennessee. These people cannot afford $1,500 to try to get some decent internet. It's just ridiculous. That should be like water and electricity, it's a basic utility. People need access to knowledge in the news, and that's just the 21st century. It's needed. Not to go off too far here, but just to put in perspective how far these towns are being left behind in the rural community, our 911 officers. So we live in between some mountains, right? There's a huge dead zone. So if we call 911, we have an emergency. If they can even get a hold of a police officer because the radios don't work out there, suppose they do get a hold of one that he's randomly in a good spot. He comes out, he has no backup. He can't radio in to call for backup at any point. He can't call an ambulance or fire truck. Cell phones don't work out here. So there's like a huge gap in safety also that is totally manageable, and they're just not progressing. It's a small town. People don't pay a whole lot of attention. It needs a spotlight on it for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. That's that's just a huge problem in terms of, the government is supposed to be there to protect like life, liberty, and property. And when you can't even contact the emergency authorities, whether it's a police situation or even like a medical emergency,
right?
It's just kind of like a failure of the government. And someone asked whether you're running as a Democrat or Republican. You are running as a Democrat, but
I am running as a Democrat.
When I was doing research on your district, I saw that in 2018, a Republican incumbent, I believe, had won the district, and by kind of an overwhelming margin, even in 2018 when the Democrats had made a lot of House gains. But I saw that the incumbent had retired in just a few months ago in early January, which means that the race is open, and kind of anyone, especially for whether you're a Democrat or Republican, if you have someone that's truly there to fight for the people, I think it presents an interesting opportunity no matter which party you're in. So I guess my question would be, as a Democrat in a heavily Republican district, how do you think your message would appeal to the types of voters that you would have to win over in a general election after the primary?
It's an interesting question. It has a lot of sides to it, and you're absolutely right. So it is a heavy red state, very Republican. And I'll tell you, my parents are Republican, my grandparents are Republican, my neighbors are Republican, and it was a choice to make for sure. But I am majority nonpartisan. I have a lot of creative solutions, just like Andrew Yang, where I try to bring people together, and it's really not about party lines for me. It's about uniting our community. I do not care if my neighbor is a Republican or a Democrat. I do not want them to starve. I want them to pay their bills, have a good education. I want our kids to go to school and be happy and to be a thriving community. I really don't care about party lines when it comes to these issues affecting our communities. So when I'm out talking, I've actually got a great response, because almost everybody I talk to is Republican, unless I'm specifically at a Democrat event. Once they talk to me and actually hear the ideas, it's really easy to see that I can pull Republican votes. And I've been really, really thrilled about that, because, a lot of people have been divided in the country over this for many years now. And a lot of people don't want to compromise, but I think they're sick of it. And I think they're sick of career politicians promising all day we're going to do stuff, and then they get in and nobody wants to compromise. Or we have government shutdowns where they're still collecting paychecks, but us out here, a lot of people aren't. Like, we can't have that. We need to push people into Congress and the Senate and mayors of all the ranks of people who can actually have adult conversations, talk about the tough topics, and come to solutions that are going to work for everybody. So, sorry, it was a little ranty.
No, I agree 100%. I personally lean a little bit to the right. Like, I think the Democrats have some good ideas, the Republicans have some good ideas. Personally, I'm not like a big fan of either establishment on both sides. But what I found unique about Andrew Yang and why I supported his candidacy in such a big way was because I saw him as that person who could bridge the divide and try to unite all the different fractured groups in our country.
Yes.
So it makes me personally really happy to see candidates who are running to try to unite that gap. Because if you can have a Democrat and someone who identifies or is running as a Democrat win in a Republican district on not because of party ID, but because of the ideas, that's what really should matter. It should be the ideas of people who are running that decides whether they get their vote, not their party ID. And another question,
and that's how it should be, for sure.
Yeah, 100%. I wanted to get in. We were joking about this right before we started about how I saw you were on Paget's channel last night, and you got into guns and abortion. I do want to get into the guns issue a bit because I think it's important. I saw on your website that you have protecting the Second Amendment, and personally, as someone who leans to the right, that makes me happy. Like, I'm a gun owner. I saw that you're a gun owner, and I think it's important fundamentally to protect the Constitution and the amendments that are provided in the Constitution. But at the same time, myself, I've seen how, like, mass shootings, there's something going on in our society, and I don't know if it's I think it's more like mental health and like very deep societal problems that are causing these issues. But I do think that there has to be something done in the interim with guns. So what are your thoughts on that as someone who supports the Second Amendment and owns guns and obviously is in a district that I'm sure there are a lot of other gun owners and Second Amendment purists, if you will. But how do you think that we should tackle that problem?
That's a deep question, and there's a lot of factors that play into this, and you touched on a few of them. Mental health is definitely one of them. So when you look at the gun violence numbers, it's really hard to argue with. But I will tell you, people who want to do harm are going to do harm. And my favorite example is the Boston Marathon. People used crock pots to make explosives. You can't make hate illegal as much as we want to. If somebody wants to hurt somebody, they're going to hurt somebody. As far as gun violence goes, 20% of new sales are semi-automatic rifles, AKs, things of that nature. If you look up the numbers on the mass shootings, the people who do these almost always don't acquire the gun in illegal means. It's either stolen or they got it from someone else. They had a straw man. So the people who are going out to buy these guns and actually going through the background check and they have it lawfully, and they're not the ones who are going to go out and do these crimes. And I think they need to be protected. There's a reason that our forefathers put that in place, because if we look back at history, things have happened. The people need to have that reassurance and be able to protect themselves against anything. And you'd have to go into some like crazy conspiracy theories, all these what ifs. What if this happened? What if that happened? Well, that's that person's right to feel safe where they live and to protect their home. And I just think we should support that. And on the side where you're saying, okay, well, what do we do about the 688 people who shot themselves dead last year in this district alone? What do we do about that? Well, that's a mental health crisis, right? This is people who feel like life is never ever going to get better. They are just beat down so hard that they say, I'm done, I'm checking out. And that, honestly, it breaks my heart. I've literally felt that before and felt like your life doesn't matter. And when I hear people say, well, how many people are in your district? 700 some thousand, right? So that's less than 1%. That's not really a big number. I actually cried when somebody said that. I'm like, so you're telling me those 700 people's lives mean absolutely nothing? Like that's terrible. So we need to improve our healthcare system for starters. We got 68,000 people in this district with no health insurance, living in poverty. We already know it's an extreme poverty area, struggling on the daily basis. We need to have mental health available to everybody who wants it immediately and drop the stigma. And that needs to go for the school age kids and adults. Like if somebody is struggling, we need to really sit down and listen. When it's across the country that suicide rates are up. And that's really what's scary. It's the hate and the depression. People are in a bad place and we need to fix that. And I think these other problems are going to drastically reduce just by making people's lives better.
Yep. No, I agree with that 100%. And I think everything you just said perfectly embodies the idea of humanity first that so many people found inspirational and something that could bring the way we need to shift the mindset of people to where we value every human being. And it's kind of like to bring up like a current issue like coronavirus. It's like people are like, oh, well, only 1 or 2% die. And I'm like, well, if half of America gets it, 150 million people, 1% of them, that's 1.5 million people. Like every single person you know would have, whether it's a coworker or a family member or a friend, everyone's going to know someone who. So it's just people's lives shouldn't be written off as just like a statistic. And I think kind of similar number. Yeah, I think kind of similarly to the gun violence and the crazy amount of suicides and depression, which I think universal basic income would do a lot to try to solve those underlying issues. And I'm sure you agree. But I'm curious specifically about the opioid crisis in your district. Is that like a big problem that you see as well?
It's a huge problem. It's definitely a huge problem. And I think when people are down, they turn to vices. And it's not even just people that turn to vices, it's people who went to the doctor and got these prescriptions and then had a hard time getting off of them, and no one was held accountable, and these people were left on their own to deal with these issues. I very strongly support legalizing cannabis, not just medicinally, but recreationally. That was going to help so many people, whether it's PTSD or anxiety or having a transfer from an opiate to something that's actually safe. There's still 0 deaths related to marijuana across the states and maybe even globally. And they already have so many tests that can prove the numbers. It's not like we're guessing anymore what would happen. We already kind of know. And not only is it good for people, it's a great business opportunity, again, for these farmers to jump on and make a ton of money and really put that back into the economy and put it back into the schools, put it everywhere, and just shower this town with love, really. I just think it would be a huge win on all sides, from the health aspect to the financial aspect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Marijuana, it's like another one of those things. It's like it should have been legalized already. It's an overwhelming on both sides of the aisle support legalization, right. But it's just like our government works so slow and nobody wants to get anything done. It's just, I don't understand it. But what are your thoughts on perhaps going a little bit further, like on Andrew? He was in favor of decriminalizing small amounts of opioid use because, in his opinion, I agree. In my opinion, I think there's kind of like a fundamental wrong in the fact that people go to jail for what, in my mind, is a mental health problem. When you're addicted on these drugs, a lot of times through no fault of your own, and you really just need help. I don't know if the jail system is necessarily the way to fix that. Where do you fall on that?
Matt, you actually said it very well. I'm in total agreement. America has the most people in prison and in jail systems than any other country. we love to lock people up for everything. And we don't pay attention to the mental health crisis as much as we should have. And I think a lot of that has to do with the stigmas that is placed on it. People just tend to get shut out instead of the help. And then it just turns to a downhill slope. So I absolutely support, one, ending the war on drugs, period. All we do by making it illegal is make it the black market where it's less safe, it's unregulated, it's dangerous. And that comes to cannabis too. A lot of people, if it was recreational or legal, whichever way, they could at least go to a shop and say, this is what's wrong with me. I have pain, or I can't sleep, or I can't eat, and actually find a strain that could benefit them instead of buying whatever they can get from whoever they can find to get it from. It's just not a safe market for people in general. And then I think we should expunge the records of the people who had these charges to deal with to try to make their life easier, because that's all it does is hurt their life. It doesn't make them better. It
Yeah, even more.
They need to
It's
go to
insult
rehabs
to
or
injury.
clinics, not jail. Right. Yeah, it's kicking people when they're down. It's taking the most vulnerable people in our communities and just hurting them further.
100%. What was this next thing I saw that was interesting?
You ask great questions, Matt. Thanks for actually looking at the site and paying attention, because there's a lot of things that go unnoticed. When I look at a lot of the other people running in this district's websites, most of them don't have a lot of points up. They usually have like maybe 3 if they have any. And I have 23 and counting.
Yeah, growing.
I had a hard time narrowing it down. So yeah, there's problems, and they're real, and they need to be addressed.
Yeah, I mean, personally, from like a voter's perspective, when I go on a candidate's website, and I remember, this is completely unrelated to anything we're talking about, but I remember when Pete Buttigieg first came out to run, whether anyone loves him or hates him, I was like, why are there no policies on his website?
Right.
But that's
yeah.
a random aside. I want to know, I saw on your website that this is going to be the final policy question. I saw on your website that you are a fan of ending the forever wars, which I think a lot of people who are watching this are a fan of. But I'm specifically curious, as someone who did serve in our armed forces, how do you see that, and what influenced your decision to take a stand where we shouldn't be getting involved in these conflicts, whether it's in the Middle East or anywhere in the world, really?
Yeah, great question. That's a tough one for so many people right now. So I have a personal stance on this, and then I have a professional stance on this. My personal experience is straight from my life. Having my dad gone most of my entire life, my mom is basically a single mother because my dad's really not there. Even though she has the financial side and the health care of it, it's still hard to raise 3 kids on your own, and the person you love is overseas 10 years, 20 years. It's crazy, right? And
Yeah.
the same wars that were going on before I was born are still happening. It's not really getting anywhere. And some of these countries are screaming, get out, leave. They don't even want us there. And while I recognize some we have made promises to and said that we're not going to abandon you, we're here to help, and we definitely shouldn't go back on our word, but we're going to have to come to some kind of common ground where we can bring our troops home, let them be with their families, actually stop fighting wars that aren't ours. And what do they say? You take care of your house first. We need to get our house in order before we can help other people's get their house in order. That's like if I have 10,000 loads of laundry in my living room and I go to my friend's house and be like, hey, you need to do your laundry. Like maybe I should do my laundry first. So I know it's like a silly way to compare the two, but I mean, my favorite memories are my dad coming home and we would get like the new Sega system and sit and play, or get the Nintendo 64 and play 007. Those are like my best childhood memories, because that was what my dad and I did in the brief times that he was home. And he's been shot at, dragged through the desert. He has rods in his arms, all kinds of stuff. And then, you know, I support the military, past and present, obviously, because I grew up in that, and then I still turned around and joined. So I'm very passionate. You know, I love the military, and that's why I think they should be home with their families and helping America.
Wow, that's I think that really hits home for a lot of people when they think of it's hard for families that are separated to be able to thrive and function. And it's like exactly what you said. What are we doing taking care of other houses when our own is in disarray? I mean, there's so many
Right.
people, especially veterans, that are on the streets, and it's really sad. And we need to do
25% of our
more
homeless
as a
population
society.
is veterans.
Wow. I didn't even
Yeah.
know that. So it's
Yeah.
something that
It's a huge number.
we need to fix as a society and really make it a central goal of ours to take care of the people who went above and beyond to
Exactly.
take care of us. So we've kind of hit our max on time for today. Someone said, "What is your strategy in terms of packaging this policy platform in a way that's palatable in a Republican-heavy district?" I think you kind of went over that a little bit before about just not making it about party and just having real conversations with people. But I guess you could go into that real quickly.
I think that naturally it's already framed that way for me because I have an insider view of that. It's actually kind of silly to me how people are stuck on I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, I'm a liberal, I'm this, I'm that. I mean, we're really all just humans trying to do our best, and we need to let go of some of these ties that we feel so strongly to, and that's part of identity, which people, they want to have a home, my background, where I came from, what I do, what I believe in, and I'm not saying that we should get away with that, but we need to come back to our humanity values and say, like, let's work together. And that's what I've been doing. And all of my platforms are set up to be fairly nonpartisan just from the get-go.
Mm-hmm. Yep. We just need to be, I think, more empathetic with each other, whether that you have a hardcore Trump supporter on this side and a hardcore Bernie Sanders supporter on this side. Everyone should be able to try to empathize with each other's stances and understand why they feel the way they feel, and then try to build a gap. So that's all. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have today. However, I would real quick like to plug your website. It is blairforcongress.com if you guys would like to go on and learn more. And then what is your Twitter? It's just at Blair Walsingham.
It is. Instagram is Blair, the number 4 TN.
I'm writing out in the chat right now at Blair Walsingham. And if there's anyone who's maybe in the Tennessee area or Western North Carolina, just in the general area of Tennessee's first congressional district, that was interested in perhaps helping out and volunteering, how would they be able to do that? I know it's kind of tough, like because of coronavirus right now. Like I was talking to this guy on Monday who's running in New York, and he was saying they're doing only like digital events and stuff. It's like a weird, hard thing for people who are trying to spread their message. But how do people?
No, it is. It's hard.
Yeah. How can people help out?
So you can go to the blairforcongress.com and there's a volunteer tab. So if you have any way that you want to help, you can do that, or you can go to the donation tab. We desperately need donations to do more campaigning. And that's something I actually love to talk about too. And I'm going to be really brief because we're running out of time. But we need other ways to do this whole system because we've got like 6 to 8% of people who ever get involved in politics. We can't afford to, and that's why our country is kind of the way that it is, because we have only millionaires and people with tons of money making all the decisions for the people who aren't millionaires. So your donations are super important. We only use them to do campaigning, to buy commercial ads, to set out signs, to do all this stuff that people really need to see. And it is hard with COVID right now. Everybody's sick. We don't want to put anybody at risk, period. So it is mostly online, and we've actually kind of paused our campaign stuff just for the moment, and we're working on a support system. We have a page coming up. We're desperately trying to get it done, of anything that you need. If you're having housing troubles, if your electric's going to get cut off, all these resources for you to help you through COVID-19. So please, either volunteer to help with that or volunteer for the campaign. Either, I would love to have you all. Thanks for listening tonight.
Yeah, no, 100%. And again, that's why I was so happy to see on your website, term limits, protect voting rights, ranked choice voting, democracy dollars, all these ideas that can help get rid of this scratch where grassroots candidates who decide, I want to help out my community and my family and make a better world for all of us. They're starting at zero while all these people have, whether they're been working within the system for so long, they just have this army build up. So it's up to the Yang Gang and a lot of people who are watching this interview to help candidates like yourself. So if you guys can volunteer on the website, if you can, I'm putting the donation link again. Anything you can spare. Times are tough these days because of the financial issues, but it's really up to one more.
Got one more thing. So everybody always says, how are we going to get the young people involved? And I know so many young people are online, and we're out here and we're trying. You guys have to come out. You're not, as soon as COVID's up, you need to come out, come to all these meetings and hear your voice, hear candidates that actually fit your ideals, because we are out here and we are fighting for you, and we cannot win or change things without your help. And there's actually more of us. So if we can just get active and come together, we can make changes. So I just really want to point that out. I know we all love the digital age, but we're going to have to do a little bit more.
No, absolutely. Real quickly, because I know we're like 5 minutes past. But
no, you're good.
That was one of I think the flaws in Andrew Yang's campaign is I felt we were very good on the digital side, but I think it was tough for a lot of people to maybe get out of their comfort zones and get on the ground. And there's nothing like having a real one-on-one conversation with a voter. There's nothing that can replace it. You can't do it with a phone call. You can't do it with a meme or a tweet. It's a one-on-one conversation. So agree 100%. Once again, it's BlairForCongress.com, at Blair Walsingham on Twitter. Really appreciate you coming on, and good luck.
Thanks, Matt.
When is the voting again?
August 6th.
August 6th. All right. See you guys all later. Make sure you like the video and subscribe.
Have a good night.
All right.